Hello, everyone. I'm Susanna DeBaca. I'm the president of Business Publications Corporation and the publisher of DSM Magazine, and I want to welcome you to our Lifting the Veil series on mental health effects of COVID-19. The series is called Life Interrupted. DSM Magazine has long been committed to the community and very deeply interested in mental health. About 4 years ago, we created a publication called Lifting the Veil in reference to ending stigma around mental health. We've published that magazine for 4 years, and last year we added an event with a panel of experts, and our plan for 2020 was to do the same thing with a publication and an event. But then COVID-19 happened. We quickly realized that there would be short and long-term mental health effects on the community, and we quickly decided that we needed to do another Lifting the Veil event, and that turned into this series. The series came together very quickly in record time, thanks to our terrific team and a very supportive slate of sponsors. It seems appropriate that the majority of our programs are happening in May during Mental Health Month. I want to give a shout out to the DSM team who made this happen: Christine Riccelli, Luke Manderfeld, Sean Rakina, Emily Schultz, Yolanda Crystal, Rebecca Zoot, Jordan Croft, and Rochelle Kelberg. We also have Stacy Thompson here with us. She is managing our video. We are getting better at Zoom, but if we have any issues with it, I hope you'll bear with us if we experience any technical challenges. I also would like to thank our sponsors before we get started. In particular, big thanks to Delta Dental, who is our presenting sponsor, Delta Dental of Iowa, and our supporting sponsors, United Way of Central Iowa, Clive Behavioral Health, which is a partnership with Mercy One, and our sustaining sponsors, Mid-Iowa Health Foundation, Employee and Family Resources, Make It Okay, UCS Healthcare, and Des Moines University. Today, we're going to be focusing on workplace interrupted. The coronavirus pandemic has put a spotlight on mental health like never before, with a slew of startling statistics revealing the effects of the crisis. The majority of employees in the US say they are dealing with some type of mental health issue as a result of the pandemic. Many are scared about their physical health, their childcare responsibilities, the new realities of social distancing, remote work, and now possibly going back to the office. Our goal is to open up the conversation, to share thoughts and provide some hope and some ideas. We're going to be talking to experts from the mental health field and some individuals from industry who can help. Here's how the program is going to work. I'll share a video, I'll introduce our speakers, and then we'll just start the panel. At the end, if we have time, I will open it up for questions from the audience. We've already received a couple of questions from the audience when you registered, and I've integrated those where I could. So first, let's hear from some folks in the workplace about how they are experiencing the pandemic. Stacy, you can roll the video.
Since every day feels almost like the same day, it's hard to get to a level of true excitement anymore. You just kind of have a middle layer of just kind of chugging along.
The challenge is feeling a sense of progress and waiting for news to be positive, for us to be able to go back to what we do on a normal day basis and make sure that people are safe.
To decipher any kind of nonverbal communication that's going on in a Zoom call. You don't have all the same cues that you do when you are face-to-face with somebody.
You know, leading an organization, when think about getting your staff paid, right? Like, what if all of our contracts fall through and we don't have any money coming in. We have to lay everybody off. So, I mean, that's one of the things that has really bothered or kind of kept me up.
I have had to be much more intentional about my structure for the day and creating boundaries for my workspace.
For us, at least, I mean, there's two of us working from home here right now, and I have 3 kids who are attempting to get an education remotely from home too. So it seems like at the end of the day, where we would normally just all come home and run and go crazy, now it seems like we've all been sort of just kind of like unplugging, typically wandering outside if the weather's a little nicer than this, and enjoying time together.
Well, it's clear from the people in our video that workplace has in fact been interrupted. The quote that every day feels like every other day, I think is very familiar to us. Zoom calls, getting our staffs paid, taking care of the people that we work with, and then of course, working with kids at home are all ways that our life has been interrupted. So those are the things we're going to talk about today, and I would like to welcome and introduce our panelists. Our first panelist is Bethany Zeitz. She is a mental health therapist and a substance abuse counselor at UCS Healthcare in Des Moines. Bethany has experience in working with a variety of populations, including children, adolescents, adults, and families, and she utilizes a variety of theoretical approaches in her work, including cognitive behavioral therapy and acceptance and commitment therapy. Welcome, Bethany. Our next panelist is Shannon Evers. Shannon is Clinical Director at Employee and Family Resources. Shannon is a licensed independent social worker who has worked in mental health for over 15 years, serving adults, couples, and families. Shannon has experience in treating a number of mental health issues, including depression, bipolar disorder, stress management, relationship issues, and trauma, but she has a specific interest and training around anxiety disorders and obsessive compulsive disorder. Lauren Burt currently serves as the head of worldwide communications at Chemin Industries, a global ingredient company dedicated to transforming the quality of life for 80% of the world. Chemin has customers in more than 120 countries and operates in more than 90 countries. So we're very interested in Lauren's global perspective on the workforce. Next, we have Jamie Haberl, who is the Executive Director of Iowa's Healthiest State Initiative, a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization driven by the goal to make Iowa the healthiest state in the country by improving the physical, social, and emotional well-being of Iowans. Next, we have Beth Russett, who is the Human Resources Director for Delta Dental of Iowa. She's served in this capacity since March of 2013. She is responsible for all human resources and facility functions at Delta Dental. And Ms. Russett's prior human resources experience includes time at Wellmark Blue Cross Blue Shield and Principal Financial Group. Next, we have Sherri Nielsen, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Easter Seals. Sherri has served Easter Seals in Iowa for over 25 years and is passionate about carrying out the organization's mission to provide exceptional services to ensure all people with disabilities or special needs and their families have equal opportunity to live, learn, work, and play in their communities. And I'd also like to thank and recognize our sponsor, our presenting sponsor, Delta Dental of Iowa. For more than 50 years, Delta Dental of Iowa has been improving the health and smiles of Iowans. Delta Dental provides dental and vision benefits to more than 1.2 million Iowans. Most recently, Delta Dental and its foundation committed up to $10.5 million in COVID-19 relief funds to Iowa dentists for claims advances as well as grants for nonprofits. And since 2002, Delta Dental has invested more than $42 million to improve the oral health and overall health of Iowans. And I'd like to introduce and welcome Mike Elam, who is the Vice President of Sales and Customer Relations at Delta Dental. Mike, welcome.
Thanks, Susanna. Hello, everyone. As Susanna mentioned, my name is Mike Elam. I'm the Vice President of Sales and Customer Relations for Delta Dental of Iowa. And I just want to add my welcome and thanks to this important discussion. You know, as a COVID-19 outbreak has impacted our lives, our everyday lives, many of the organizations in Iowa and around the country moved quickly to assess how to protect one another and figure out what we could do to lend a hand to our neighbors in need. As you've heard, Delta Dental of Iowa has taken several steps to support the communities that we all work in to get through this situation. And as a health and wellness company, we certainly understand the importance of physical health, but also emotional well-being. For this reason, we're pleased to support the Lifting the Veil series and the important messages it brings to Iowans during this time. I hope you get something meaningful out of the discussion today. And again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you very much to Delta Dental for helping make this series possible. So now we're going to go ahead and begin our panel, and I'll start out by asking all of our panelists the same question, kind of the blanket question. What are the biggest mental health challenges that leaders or employees are experiencing as a result of workplace changes during the pandemic? And I'll go ahead and ask Bethany to answer first. Bethany?
Definitely. I think that some of the biggest challenges that we've experienced here at UCS are just the rapid pace of change and having to cope with differences from Monday to Wednesday about what our expectations and what changes we're making. We have over 115 professionals in 3 clinics and 11 medication units across the state. So we've had to meet a variety of needs, both for clients and for our staff as well. So trying to kind of balance the needs of clients who have to come in daily to dose medications, as well as staff working from home, staff having to balance their family needs and things like that. So really trying to find a good middle ground has been impactful for us.
Thank you. Shannon, I'll ask you the same question from a clinical perspective. What are the biggest mental health challenges that you think leaders and employees are facing now?
Well, I think that we're all kind of in the same boat, and that most of us are experiencing a lot of uncertainty. Most of us are experiencing a lot of lack of control and concerns about safety, our own safety, the safety of our loved ones and our family members, as well as others in the community. And these are really all prime conditions for experiencing increased anxiety. And many of us are used to experiencing anxiety or stress in specific areas of our life. And right now, I think we're experiencing anxiety in nearly all areas of our life. Furthermore, the ways that we typically cope and get support are not necessarily readily accessible to all of us. So that's kind of a unique challenge I think we're all facing, both outside and inside the workforce.
Absolutely. I think that's a universal concern. So next, we'll go to Lauren. What do you think are the biggest mental health challenges leaders or employees are facing now?
I think as Kemin is a global company, what's been interesting is that we have people all over the world. However, we're all facing the same unknowns, the same challenges, the same questions. And since Kemin has been dealing with this since January in China and Singapore, and things have moved more to North America, but we've realized that we are more similar than we are different. So whether you're in Des Moines, Iowa or Shanghai, China, people are trying to educate their children at home. Some people don't like working from home. Some people enjoy it. So we really have to do a good job of constantly engaging with our employees and surveying them so we can adapt quickly to what they need, what's working, what's not working. So we've seen really the same anxieties and challenges literally all across the world. So it's very unifying, but it's also allowed us to say, what do people need? And this has changed people's work life and also their personal lives. So we have to make sure that we're adapting daily, if not hour by hour, to make sure that we are taking care of our employees.
Thank you. So I'll ask Jamie the same question. What are you seeing as the biggest mental health challenges that leaders and employees are facing?
Yeah, so I'd echo a lot of other comments. I think the balance of work and, how do you manage having your children at home? Many people are dealing with not having access to childcare or to the things that they normally have, whether it was school or now even childcare as we move into the summer months. So how do we balance that? And I think it's causing, a lot of exhaustion with a lot of employees trying to figure out, now your home has become your workplace, it's become your everything. And you have different challenges today than you had when you could leave your house to go to the office. I think, we're just trying to balance, when do we turn on our work and when do we turn off, and how do we handle those different disruptions? I also think that, for most of Americans and probably really everyone, having that control is really critical. And we expect a lot of, quick answers to challenges that come our way. And there are a lot of unknowns with the pandemic. And so really trying to adjust to not having the answers yesterday and that we don't have the answers tomorrow either, that this is always evolving. And how does that impact our overall mental health? We have increased anxiety, we have increased depression, we have increased just the unknowns that are happening. And I think the other thing is technology. So for some of us, technology is an easy thing, but for many of us, it's not an easy thing. And so, how do we adapt to using those new technologies, and how do we even understand, does the technology work in our own home for all of us to be working from here and having our kids do their schoolwork as well? That, I think we're learning, how important that technology is and important having that broadband. But it also increases your anxiety because you might be in the middle of a meeting and lose that technology quickly as well.
Very good insights. Beth, you are running an HR department. What are you seeing as the biggest mental health challenges for leaders or employees?
Now, we work in a very highly collaborative environment, and so our people have a lot of connectivity during the day. So when we quickly moved to work from home, people weren't ready, they weren't expecting it, but they did a beautiful job of making that transition. But that lack of connectivity on a day-to-day basis in person with people, for some, they're working in very different conditions, and there's some isolation for people that are working by themselves that are used to coming to the office every day. And then you have, as others have said, you've got the people that are working from home and trying to balance the work and the life, and their spouse and or children might be there too. And just how do I manage all of that? How do I take care of myself on top of those things? When do things start and stop? And then for some, there's financial concerns that could lead to more mental challenges for them as they work through that. The lack of structure and routine when you're used to getting up and going to work, people miss that or try to figure out, how do I make that work for me going forward? And then, as others have said, it's that the fear of the unknown. What don't we know? What's real? Do we have facts? Do we have opinions? And how is that shifting? And how do we stay on top of all of that to connect and help our employees through this?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And Sherri, what about you? What do you see as the biggest mental health challenges for leaders or employees?
So thank you. I would concur with what others have said. I think the big piece that maybe hasn't been mentioned that I think we've seen a little bit of is fear. For our team members, our frontline team members are out there providing services in person. So I think the fear started with, what if I unknowingly spread the disease to our clients who sometimes are at a higher risk So that fear that they would make someone sick. And then I think also, as we were providing services, not necessarily having all the PPE we needed at the beginning of this pandemic, and having to kind of wait on orders to come in also caused fear. And I think just that uncertainty of not being sure how things will go back to normal and what services would continue and what services wouldn't continue. We also experienced in our organization some layoffs due to programs being closed to meet the governor's request to keep our community safe. So I think that that was something else that we saw in our team members is what's going to close next. And in those service lines where our services were closed, I think a great concern for our clients that might not be getting what they needed during that time.
Thanks. It's clear that depending on what seat someone is sitting in, there are different issues, but really so many areas of our lives are touched by this pandemic, and our work life very much so. So now I'm going to kind of allow each one of you to bring out your own expertise and drill down a little bit into your areas. So Bethany, looking from the mental health perspective, what are some common signs of stress for employees working from home, and what are a few best practices for staying well?
Definitely. I think that depending on the person, some of us are really good at being aware of stress that we experience, and others of us are not necessarily so aware. So you might notice increased feelings of irritability, a decrease in distress tolerance, things that usually were not super bothersome are all of a sudden kind of ticking you off, making you annoyed. You want to scream at your kids or your dog or your spouse. Sleep problems, trouble falling asleep, trouble staying asleep, just not feeling restful when you wake up in the morning. And even some physical issues, stomach pain, headache. If you're one of those people who get stressed and you bring your shoulders all the way up to your ears, you might be experiencing some increased kind of pain in your neck, head area. So as long as we pay attention to those and we're mindful of those, we can help to cope with them. There's a variety of ways that you can engage in self-care. I think that it's important to recognize that self-care is different for everyone. It doesn't just mean bubble baths and trips to the spa. It can mean making yourself a healthy dinner. The practice of prepping and making healthy food can be really calming and really helpful for people. Using grounding techniques, whether it's yoga, breathing, there's lots of fantastic resources online that can help you to use healthy breathing and grounding techniques to reduce your stress. And also having appropriate expectations. You're not working from home just because. You're working from home because the world is kind of in crisis at the moment. So don't expect yourself to be at the same level that you might have been in February before all of this started. Make sure that you have appropriate expectations for yourself and what you're doing.
Thank you. Very helpful. The next question will be for Shannon. Just when we're getting used to working from home, now some companies are reopening. What are the biggest concerns and some ideas for managing that transition?
Well, I work a lot as a therapist. I work with employers and employees both, and I hear kind of similar to what we've already been covering, a lot of concerns about uncertainty, a lot of concerns about what work is supposed to look like during a pandemic, concerns about what my work performance should look like during the middle of the pandemic, as well as how employees can manage all of the logistical life, parenting, personal life stresses while also remaining productive and focused at work. I've heard some specific employees really question whether they feel like a work-life balance is achievable during this time. The good news is that some of the strategies that I think could be effective for managing some of this transition are things that we probably are already familiar with, and that really falls down to having clear communication between employers and employees kind of as a two-way street. setting clear expectations. For many of us, expectations look a little bit different, whether we're working from home or maybe we have a reduced workload or our hours have changed. So it's important that employers are very clear about what the expectations are at this time. And it's important for employees to, in return, ask for clarification around those expectations if it doesn't feel clear. Continuing to have conversations about work performance. I've talked to a lot of employees who aren't sure whether they're doing a good job. So having conversations around, yes, this is working really well, keep up the good work, I think can be important to help people manage anxiety. Also discussing support needs. So for many people, working from home or just, working in general, has additional challenges that weren't present before, caring for family members, childcare, those kinds of things. So employers checking in and asking employees what they can do to support employees to help them to feel productive, to help them to work toward a work-life balance, again, can be really meaningful in terms of helping people feel a little more confident and reducing their sense of anxiety in the workplace.
Thanks, that's very helpful. And I want to call out that we do have the chat open and I see a question has come in. So along the way, listeners, if you want to chat your questions or even just have a dialogue among yourselves as you're listening, we welcome that. So Lauren, now I want to go to you, and you touched on this in your opening comments, being a global company. But the question I have for you is, what are some unique challenges that global companies are facing in terms of workplace mental health and wellness?
Yes, and the big challenge when you look at this from a global perspective is that even though we all face the same questions or anxieties or fears or having your children at home unexpectedly while trying to navigate working from home, the big difference is that really each region and each country is experiencing this in a different way. So for example, the US, we are in a very different spot than our teams down in Brazil or Mexico, who are having a lot of challenges and they have an experience of this that's very different. And so we have to work around everything from government mandates. For example, our team in Italy, they were on a very severe lockdown and they could only travel 300 meters outside of their home at one designated time a week. So that's very different than our experience here in Des Moines and the US. And so we have to make sure that we continually have communication with our teams. And we have found that to be very effective. In March, we implemented a daily live call with our CEO that we do every day, Monday through Friday. And it's live, just like this call we're on today. And employees can engage, they can ask questions. And transparency through this is so important. I think Jamie was talking about how we have to be able to say, we don't know what tomorrow may bring or the day after that. But I think when a company or a business is transparent and keeps communication open and says, I'm also nervous or I'm also readjusting to this new normal, it makes employees feel more comfortable. We do surveys often of our teams right now. Every day when we send out a communication, people can submit anonymous feedback, whether that be positive, negative, whatever it may be. And we've taken what we've learned from our teams in Asia and Europe because they are reopened and they are in a different spot than we are here in the US. And we've heard that having webinars on mental health and free access to meditation platforms and apps really helped them navigate this. So we replicated many of those practices here in the US. But we also have to message it in the standpoint that we are talking to our people here in Des Moines differently than we're talking to people in Brazil who are having a very challenging time with the virus and in their communities. So it's really important that we are transparent, open, and honest with our employees because we're all feeling the same things, and making sure that we continue to keep a pulse on what people need and what they want and what's happening in their city and in their region. Like I said earlier, I think this has brought us all together as a company, but really as a group of people, humanity. And I think it's been empowering for our teams to say, wow, what I feel in Des Moines is the same as you feel in China. And we have those same doubts or those same fears or, you know, insecurities about the future. And so the more we can communicate and share, I think the better.
Thank you, Lauren. Those international insights are really fascinating. But let's come back to Iowa for a minute. Jamie, you are very focused on Iowa as a state, and you have done a Make It Okay campaign to reduce stigma. So what are some ways that employers can help to reduce stigma around mental health right now when it's so much part of the conversation?
Yeah, so I think, recognizing that stigma is often, the #1 barrier for people actually seeking treatment is really important. And that's, a year ago when we launched the Make It Okay campaign, which is really focused on the reduction of stigma around mental illness. I don't think we ever thought we would be in a situation where it's even more important today that we're having a conversation about mental health and mental illness, because each and every one of us is now in the middle of a mental health crisis because we're dealing with a pandemic that has so many unknowns. So there's lots of opportunities for employers to be engaged. So in Iowa, Make It Okay is available to each and every Iowan. There's lots of resources available. We have posters that are specifically aimed to help employers. And I think I'll reiterate what everyone else has said. Communication is key. And it's important that we're all talking about mental health and we're talking about mental illness, and that we can learn more about what it is so that we can support our team members. If we don't talk about it, we'll continue to have the stigma that sits around mental illness. And right now, I think it's important that we actually have those open communications. We check in with our teammates, see how they're doing, see how we can help support them. Many employers offer an EAP program, so reinforcing that those services are available. And there's also a number of other, free services that are being provided through the state of Iowa, whether it's contacting your 211 or Your Life Iowa is another free resource that anyone can contact. They can use the chat, the text, or the phone line. So I think just reminding people that those services are available and to encourage them to take the steps that they need. Just like we would if we broke our arm, we're not going to wait to seek services, and we shouldn't do the same thing when it comes to our mental health. So that open communications and those open conversations about mental illness is critical right now.
Thanks. Those are great ideas. Beth, you are running a HR department. So what types of changes are HR departments considering to support employee mental health?
It's really about what are we doing more of in a lot of cases. I agree, it's the communication, it's highlighting the benefits that we've had available. Now with the telehealth, it's a great way to connect for a mental health perspective for people. And so really highlighting what are their benefits, what makes that available. I agree with the communication. It's so important that we keep the communication open, the video meetings. We have all team meetings via video. Leaders are reaching out. We've added a special Wellness Wednesday communication that really focuses on all over health, whether that be, and it highlights the Make It Okay and this type of presentation to make that available to our employees so that they can take part in these benefits. There's online courses around mental health that we've highlighted too. And it's the part of the mental health is the financial wellness as well. We've offered to our employees financial wellness that we typically do in person. We did that via video, and people could do one-on-one videos with a financial advisor to talk through their situation and where they are to help balance that out for people. And it's the physical well-being as well that aligns with that. How do you stay active? And at the beginning, I think we talked about it a lot, and people were going out. They're home. I'm going to go out and take a walk at lunch. And the longer we've been home, the more we probably settle into old routines. So last week, our CEO called for recess. And at 9 o'clock in the morning, we all took recess and went outside and got some fresh air and walked. And so it's that overall, how do we stay connected? How do we communicate? It's involving our employees in it. It's our leaders talking with their employees of how are they doing? What can we do to help? You know, here's what we know. Here's what we don't know. It's preparing them for the changes when we do get to the point to return to the office. What is it going to look like? What are the changes that we've made? You know, what are we doing to help them from a safety and a wellness perspective? And really having a lot of flexibility about how people work now and how they'll work as we move forward.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. I love your idea of recess. That sounds like a really good mental health break, no matter what age we are. Sherri, the question that I have for you, specifically tapping into your expertise, are what are some issues employers should be especially aware of to support team members with disabilities or special needs?
Thank you. So I think it's first important that we recognize that individuals with disabilities tend to be underemployed or unemployed at a higher rate than individuals without disabilities. So I think that that's always a fear in the back of people's mind of, you know, if I lose my job. But like what everyone else has said already, I think the most important thing that employers need to know is communication. And I would really stress the importance of individualized communication with each team member. I think the most important thing a leader can do right now is to be having individual conversations with each of their direct reports. And that includes individuals with disabilities and understanding what are your fears? What are you thinking about? What are barriers that are preventing you from being most successful in our current work environment? And then really identifying solutions to support that team member be able to be at their best. You know, one thing that I would just remind people is that whether someone has a disability or not, an accommodation, a workplace accommodation typically costs $70 or less. And so it's important as employers that we really try to hang on to our best employees right now. And all the research will show that that individual relationship between the supervisor and the employee makes all the difference in someone's success and their mental health at work.
Sorry, I keep forgetting to unmute myself, and I'm doing that because my dog is barking. I think that must be a source of stress for everybody in all of these Zoom calls. I'll just admit it out loud here. So before we go on to opening it up to questions from the audience, I do want to share a little bit of information with you. And want to remind you that we have one more in this series. It will be next Friday, and it'll be another panel called Equity and Inclusion Interrupted. It will be Friday, same time next week. You can register at dsmmagazine.com/liftingtheveil-2020. And I really want to emphasize this one. I see in the chat that somebody has pointed out that the pandemic has exposed disparities, especially for people of color who have less access to jobs. There are so many ways that this pandemic is exacerbating inequity. We felt it was critical to address it. So if you know people who you believe would benefit from this, please share the word. I think it will be a fascinating discussion just like we're having today. I also want to encourage you to subscribe to our DSM and IA newsletters. They are free. And to subscribe if you do not already get DSM magazine. We cover arts and culture, but we also focus on a lot of community type of issues like we are today around mental health. And then finally, I mentioned at the very beginning that we normally have an annual publication and event around lifting the veil. We will still have that this year, so mark your calendar for November 19th, and we hope that you will all be able to join. So now I'll go ahead and open it up, and I'll ask a couple of questions, and then I see there's some coming in from the audience as well. But I definitely want to ask a question to all of the panelists, very action-oriented, about what resources either in or out of the workplace might be available for employees who are struggling. And I think, Stacy, we may have a slide with some resources that a few of the panelists suggested as well. So why don't we start with Bethany?
Yeah, I think that reaching out to your HR department to find out if you are eligible for EAP benefits is really important. And also reach out to a therapy provider. Most of us are continuing to provide services via Zoom, which has been really beneficial for a lot of people. I have people who are excited that they don't have to get in the car and drive to the office, so it takes less time away from their day. It's more convenient. There's almost a level of ease because they're coming from a place where they feel comfortable at home into the therapeutic environment. So definitely reach out and see if you can make that work in your schedule.
Terrific. Shannon, any tips for resources?
Yeah, I would just kind of agree with everything that Bethany just said. At EFR, in addition to offering counseling services and EAP, we are also offering some support groups which have been successful on different topics, from parenting to kids and youth issues. So that has been a free resource that's available to folks as well. But yes, many insurance providers for time waived copays and things like that during the pandemic and are allowing for telehealth. So that has been a great resource.
Terrific. Lauren, any places you'd steer people?
Well, as far as a company internal, we make sure, back to the conversation about communication, making sure that we are sharing articles, resources externally with our employees, and also expanding our telehealth offerings and services. And we gave free access to a meditation app that people have really enjoyed, things like that. So not only creating internal programming that is either free or discounted or just available and making it known what's out there, but also sharing those external resources as well, I think is really important for employees and teams to know what exists inside the company, then also externally.
Terrific. Jamie, some resources?
Yeah, I would say just a couple of them I mentioned, and accessing 211, Your Life Iowa has a number of resources. NAMI has a number of support groups available and other resources just to learn about mental health and mental illnesses. And then the Make It Okay website, makeitokay.org/Iowa, has a lot of resources that anyone can utilize and access.
Terrific. Beth?
I would agree with what others are saying. I think it's so important to share with our employees. I'm sure that everyone's getting inundated with all the different resources available. So that's why we did our Wellness Wednesdays, where we could pull together internal and external resources to provide fresh and new opportunities for our employees wherever that help may be needed. So a lot of the things that everybody's been talking about, I do think that a lot of people that have used the telehealth for mental health purposes, and it's been very helpful, and it's a new experience. So it's been very welcomed.
That's terrific. And Sherri, I know you sent in some of the resources that Stacy just put up on a slide.
So yeah, there's some, I think that's been one of the benefits that we're going to see come out of this situation is really people thinking about mental health and thinking about what resources people need. So there's 3 resources that I would recommend. First, Department of Human Services recently received a grant and they've contracted with community providers across the entire state where anyone can receive free counseling. So that's a great resource to have, and it's on the website right there. And then Polk County Health Services, right here in Polk County, they put together a whole packet of talking points. There are some webinars that they're doing specifically for employers to talk about how do you support your team members. One of the things that I like about their packet is they give people actual words, because I think, there's still a little bit of stigma out there. There's still makes people uncomfortable, but they give you words to talk about and asking, are you okay and how are you doing, and then how to support folks. And then last but not least, the Greater Des Moines Partnership did a webinar a couple weeks ago where they had some different providers, Easter Seals being one of them, talk about trauma and resiliency and the importance of building resiliency and how we can utilize this time to really assist our loved ones and our workforce work through this in a positive way. And I think they keep their webinars up for a couple months. So that would be another, it's about an hour resource that I would recommend for folks.
Terrific. Well, we have a question in chat, and I'm going to throw that to Bethany and Shannon. It's a tough one. We have the question someone chats is, we have several employees who are experiencing marital issues as a result of this situation. What can we as employers do to support these employees? So let's hear from the specific clinical folks. Bethany?
I think encouraging that your relationship is under more stress than usual. So you might need to engage in some resources to help you cope with that, whether it is engaging in marital counseling, whether it's reaching out to someone in your church or other organization. But everyone is experiencing changes in their relationships. And I think more of us than maybe would admit are going through marital issues at the moment because we're stuck with our spouses and our kids all the time. So just normalizing it and saying, hey, there's resources, there's stuff that you can access.
Shannon, what about you?
I agree with Bethany. I mean, we're seeing probably an increase in that as well, both from our EAP customers and some of our therapy counseling customers. And so having somebody to talk to about that, I think, can sometimes take the pressure off of that situation. It does feel very alienating. Bethany would probably agree that those of us who are therapists hear these issues, 8 times a day from different people, whereas for individuals, it can feel really isolating. So sometimes being able to just talk to somebody about that helps relieve some of that pressure.
Great. So I'll ask this question of both Lauren and Beth, since you're in company, but what is, in your opinion, the role of communication in supporting workforce mental health? Lauren?
I think what's really important is keeping communication open and transparent. And we have also seen a lot of positive feedback from our employees when they hear from our CEO and our leadership team, and having them say, my kids are home too, or I'm stressed about going to high V, or whatever it may be. And so I think, similar to what many of you have said, when you normalize it and you create that empathy, because literally all of us, regardless of where we work or where we live or what we do, are feeling these same emotions and have these same fears and challenges. So from a corporate perspective or from a business, making sure that leadership is talking to their teams one-on-one, but then also from all employee engagement, when you hear it from someone in those roles, I think it also makes people feel more comfortable and confident that they aren't alone in it, and that people in those leadership roles are trying to provide the resources and make sure that employees feel listened to and supported, and that we are really in this together, and that's very shown transparently.
Thanks. Beth, what about you, the role of communication in the workplace?
I think it's even heightened now. When you move away from being able to see everybody on a daily basis, and you have those people that you can talk to when you're going through a hard time, to be able to still connect with folks. We've done some happy hours where people can get together with other people from the department. It's those real examples from leaders. It's that flexibility of maybe somebody usually works 7:30 to 4:30, but they've got kids and they can't do that. So what can they do, and how can we be flexible with that to get the work done and maybe do it in different ways? But I think that communication is just so important, and that leader-employee connection and coworker connection. It's not all just leaders to employees, but it's teams getting together in different ways.
Fantastic. Last question before we begin to wrap up, and I'll ask, I think I'll ask Sherri this question. What are some ways that leaders can help team members develop resilience in the workplace?
So I think, people have talked about communication. So I think one of the most important things we can do is really have that personal relationship. All of the research shows that when people are going through trauma, whether it be the big T or the little t, that the relationships they have in their life are what is going to help them move through that trauma and come out stronger and healthier in the end. I have talked with our team leaders here in our organization, and I really think the most important thing as leaders we can do right now is start every conversation we're having with our team members is, how are you? How is your family? What can I help you with? And really demonstrate that we care about the people that work for us and with us, and we want them to be successful.
That's great. Jamie, do you want to take that same question about developing resilience?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think it's, putting the human factor into all of this and making sure that together we can, get through this event, because it won't be the last one. And I think that's something we have to recognize is, these type of events build those resilience factors in each and every one of us, but we might need more support to get through it. And so how do we help each other through this event so that when the next, whether it's a pandemic or another natural disaster impacts Iowa, that we can come out stronger each time. So I think communications and just making sure that we have that empathy and we're connecting with our team is so important.
Terrific. Well, I want to have the chance for every panelist to share some parting thoughts or observations, and we have a little bit of time. So if you guys have a minute or so, what you'd like to conclude in farewell to send people off with. Let's start with you, Bethany.
I think much like I talk with people about, we increase our vitamin C intake when we start to feel a tickle in our throat and start to feel sick. Increase whatever your mental health vitamin C is. Make sure that you're taking care of yourself more frequently than usual because you're going through something different.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Shannon, what are your sort of parting thoughts?
I think just like I've heard the panelists say over and over, communication and compassion can really go a long way. I think all of us feel more successful when we feel listened to and supported and understood, both in our personal relationships and life endeavors, but especially at work too. So compassion.
Thank you. Lauren, what are your parting thoughts or observations?
I think that so many of us, like I said earlier, are more similar than we are different. And while this pandemic has been so challenging and devastating personally, professionally for many around the world, I think it has created a newfound civility and empathy for humanity and for each other. And so I would encourage that open communication, whether it be about, how do you feel about working from home, or how is your family, how are you feeling, and just continuing the positive things that have come out of this so we are kinder to each other and also kinder to ourselves when we have a bad day as we navigate all of this.
Thanks. Jamie, what are your parting thoughts?
Yeah, I think we all have to remember it's okay to not be okay. And, during times like this, it's important that we seek those services, that we take the time to ask people really how are they doing and listen intently and provide, access to new ways that we can get through this together, because in the end, we'll be much stronger.
Thank you. Beth, what are your parting thoughts or observations?
I think it's important too to remember all the things we're learning. I've learned a lot about video calls and how to stay connected to people differently. We've had opportunities to do different work, to learn about different things, about how people react to that. What are ways that we can be supportive of one another? So I think it's keeping an eye too of what the opportunities have been for us to learn and grow as we work through this. And I think it also has opened up a lot of conversation about mental health and how important that is, as well as people's physical, mental health, financial health. The overall well-being of people is so important.
Fantastic. And Sherri, what about you? What are your parting thoughts?
So one thing that we didn't really get to talk about today, but I want to just mention, is that make sure that you're aware of your team members who might be supporting a child with a disability at home. I know parenting, I have 5 children myself, having them all back home has been something. But our parents that are trying to work with children with disabilities at home, that is a real tough balance. So making sure you're giving them some support and attention. And then I think the other thing, as leaders, it's important that we do in the workplace is just acknowledge our own fear and our own struggles. When we do it, people follow us and they know that it's okay for us to be talking about what's going on and how we're dealing with it. And it just allows a safe place for folks.
That's terrific. Well, I want to thank all of our panelists again. And I certainly want to have a moment to thank all of our sponsors, Delta Dental of Iowa, our presenting sponsor, United Way of Central Iowa, and Clive Behavioral Health, a partnership with Mercy One, were our supporting sponsors, and our sustaining sponsors, Mid-Iowa Health Foundation, Employee and Family Resources, UCS Healthcare, Make It Okay, and Des Moines University. We could not do this without you, so we very much appreciate it. Please tune into our program next week on Life Interrupted around equity and inclusion. Thank you very, very much for tuning in. We appreciate your attendance and we appreciate everything you do to reduce the stigma around mental health and lift the veil. So this concludes our program. Thank you and have a great weekend.